this year I decided to start a journey that I'm sure a lot of people have thought about. I decided that, you know what, this year, this is it. This is the year that I'm gonna start weight loss, and I'm actually gonna stick through it. So I know probably a lot of us have had some crazy idea like that before. So I started looking up all the things, started doing all the things to start losing weight, lifting, cardio, taking all of the junk food out, and especially taking out any of the sugary drinks. But of course, your body starts to crave these sugary drinks, and then you don't want to fall into that temptation of giving into the regular sodas, but at the same time you want to get rid of some of these cravings. So then you start to look towards diet sodas. So today I will actually be talking about how switching to a diet soda can actually help promote a healthy lifestyle for the average person. So I'm going to be talking about some of the high risks that regular soda has, how diet soda can remove some of these risks, and whether diet soda is actually safe for consumption. So it was a study conducted in 2013 by the University of Southern California. Basically, they aimed to show whether there was any relationships available between the amount of high fructose corn syrup in countries, whether there was any connection between the countries that have a high amount of high fructose or have available high fructose corn syrup compared to those countries that don't. And it showed that the countries that do have high fructose corn syrup available to them, more accessible, have a higher chance of having type 2 diabetes. There was another study conducted by the University of Princeton in 2010 that also showed that not all sweeteners are equal when it comes to weight gain. So they basically did a study on rats that showed that rats that were given corn syrup compared to just regular table salt actually gained more weight than those rats that were just given regular salt. So then, because in our country that regular sodas are really easy to access to, and we could just drink them, and it's hard to gauge how much we're actually consuming since they're just in liquid form. It's easy for us to just overconsume these beverages, and then there's other risks such as type 2 diabetes and obesity that come with them. So then how can diet soda help reduce some of these risks? So then basically diet soda doesn't contain any of the high fructose corn syrup, and it also doesn't come with any of the calories. So basically there was a study done on August with people that were given stevia and aspartame, and they basically said that the people that were given those artificial sweeteners did not feel any more hunger, and therefore they did not compensate by eating more food, which means that if you're on a diet and you basically have a 2,000 calorie deficit or limit, if you were to say you wanted to drink regular soda, the calories would push you over that limit, which basically wouldn't help you lose weight. While if you were to just drink regular diet soda, since it has no calories, it wouldn't push you over your limit of 2,000 calories, and then you would still stay under your calorie deficit to still lose weight. There was another study done in 2004 with 78,000 women that basically showed that in a span of a year, they gained around 1 to 2 pounds when given alternate sweeteners. But the thing is that during this study, food consumption was not taken into consideration. So basically, the study didn't correlate the fact that the artificial sweeteners had any relationship with the actual gain weight, and the fact that it was only 1 to 2 pounds within a year. In a year span, 1 to 2 pounds isn't really a lot of weight to be saying that artificial sweeteners actually cause gain weight. So then, is diet soda safe to consume? So most of the studies that showed that people were getting type 2 diabetes because of diet soda were people that already had some obesity issues, or were people that already had diabetes and they just happened to be drinking diet soda. And also, most of the studies showed that if there was mass amounts daily intake of diet soda, it would lead towards type 2 diabetes, but anything in large consumption would usually have some type of negative effect. And the large consumption of regular soda usually has equal or even greater this than diet soda. And then there was a study in 2014 conducted in a weight loss challenge that basically compared water versus diet soda consumption, and it showed that water was actually not superior to diet soda. So then if you're trying to do a diet, like I said, and then you decide once in a while you're going to drink diet soda, it actually won't have any effect on your diet. And the fact that water wasn't superior to diet soda basically shows that once in a while if you were to drink a diet soda, it wouldn't actually have any effect when it comes to your diet. So then, should you switch over to diet soda? Well, if you're planning on going on a diet or anything like that, the chances are that you're probably going to have some cravings to have some sugars in your diet. And in the long run, it could be very beneficial because these diet sodas, even though they have artificial sweeteners, they will reduce your cravings, and they don't come with any of the sugars or calories. So when it comes to diet and weight loss, they could actually help you because it won't push you over your calorie limit, and it won't have any of the negative effects. So with the right balance and the normal consumption of diet soda, it would actually help you promote a healthy lifestyle in the long run. Thank you.
Really excellent. Although something I will say, there's some just a question really. Does diet soda provide hydration like water?
Well, I feel like water probably is like your main source of water that you want to drink.
When it comes to hydration.
Right, like water is obviously like the best one, but just like once in a while if you wanted to have something sweet, diet soda is like a good exchange of regular soda.
And that is something I 100% agree with.
Yeah.
Because I drink diet soda too.
All right. I like the introduction using your personal experience as a way to kind of lead us to the topic. I think you could do a little bit more to show that there's controversy about diet sodas, but the idea that you're defending them is pretty reasonable. It's clearly spelled out that that's the goal for the presentation, and there's a good preview of the supporting structure. Some of the same problems that I mentioned earlier exist here. That you have a tendency to state those secondary points not as declarative sentences but as explanations. And this is, like I said, not an informative speech, so go ahead and make the argument that high fructose corn syrups in regular sodas cause a risk. Diet sodas prevent that risk. Diet sodas are safe to consume. Let's make the claim and not hide what your position is, although I think it's relatively clear. The body of the speech, we got a little bit of that thing that I mentioned earlier. You set up a structure at the beginning of the speech. The signposting is not as clear in the body of the speech as it probably needs to be. It wasn't that hard to follow because the points are pretty basic, but I do think that especially when we're getting ready to do the debates at the end of the term, you have to do a lot more signposting because you have multiple issues that are being talked about by multiple people. It's probably a good idea to do something that's easier to pick out and say, okay, let's go to point number one now that we're done with that, point number two, that sort of thing. I could see where you were making those transitions, but it should probably be a little bit more obvious to the audience in the context of what we're doing here. Now, the proof is interesting because you refer to a lot of studies. Sometimes the studies are partially identified. We got a USC study and we've got a Princeton study talking about the dangers of sugar and the relationship to type 2 diabetes. So those are somewhat cited, but later on I got a reference to a 2004 study. I don't know where it was done and who conducted it, where it was reported on. I think that's a little bit problematic. There's data that on a 2014 study that you mentioned later. In fact, that seems to me like the study that's most useful to you, especially on that third argument, and that you ought to be able to sell that to us a little bit more if you could give us some qualifiers on the source and the nature of that research. I think it would do a good job at making your arguments be a lot more acceptable to people. They're less likely to be skeptical of some of the things that are being presented there. So I thought that there was some decent information there. I think you probably need a little bit more. There's not much demand, I think, to show the risks in that first point. Everybody, I mean, let's face it, even forget the high fructose corn syrup, even if it's just plain sugar, that's not necessarily a good thing. And you do mention, for instance, that that it's related to a lot of potential disease, that kind of thing. What I thought was missing a little bit was some demonstration of people who have had success either losing weight or reducing disease by going to the use of diet sodas. You're the one study that you talk about from 2004 is a study that said, oh, well, there was a 1 pound weight gain, and you said that's not much. So basically, your proof on this point is debunking the research that the other side was using that say that that's not that big a deal. But it doesn't show that people did in fact lose weight or did have less disease as a result of switching from high fructose corn syrup or sugar to aspartame or stevia or any of these other kinds of products. And that, I think, is the thing that you need the most in the speech, since that's ultimately the argument that you're making. I thought it was delivered very nicely. You speak to the audience effectively. It's paced well. You're doing a good job there. So most of the issues have to do with the nature of the evidence. I think some of the evidence that you have is good, but it's not being cited clearly enough. And then I do think you need some more evidence on a couple of points. All right, thank you.